Hey, what's up, everybody? This is James, also known as Just Some Nerd. Thank you guys for joining us tonight. Here in just a second, I'm going to be joined by Wes, A.K.A. the Portrait Dude, and we're going to be talking some cosplay. We're going to be talking about all of the conventions that have been canceled and postponed. We're going to talk about camera gear, which is always a fun topic. We're going to talk about shopping, kind of our recommendations for maybe cameras that people might be interested in shopping for. So, without any further ado, here is the man himself, the Portrait Dude. How are you doing tonight, man?
Doing all right, buddy. How about you?
Oh, we're hanging in there, having fun. It's the weekend. If you can't, hardly tell the difference between the weekdays and the weekend at the moment.
Are we keeping track of days now?
Trying to. I just saw a meme a few minutes ago while I was waiting on you to call in on Skype, and it was like, "Who wants to be a millionaire?" And the question was, "What day is it?" And the options were Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, or 1983. I was like, I don't know. At this point, I don't know.
It feels like it. I was looking at a video that The Rock posted the other day, and he was singing the Moana song, one of the Moana songs with his daughter. And it's like, she doesn't know that Daddy's Maui. And he's like, I don't even know what day it is, but, here. And I was like, I feel that very much,
Yeah, I remember back when Finding Nemo was big, Ellen DeGeneres offered to call her kids' friends or something like that to do the voice of Dory, and they just did not understand the concept of this.
To see that voice coming out of a human mouth, it's like, what?
Right. So I lived in Athens for a long time, and of course Athens is where Ohio University is, and the most kind of famous recent alumni from Ohio University is I'm blanking on her name off the top of my head. Maybe you know it, but it's the voice of Bart Simpson from The Simpsons.
I don't know her name. I did not know that. That's cool.
Yeah, I'm totally blanking on her name, but anytime they need a celebrity spokesperson for something, she's who they call. So if you go watch a movie, at the Athena, which is the little art house cinema on Court Street, she does the little introduction to the movies, which is pretty funny.
Well, that's the good thing about having that voice, is that something that somebody in the last 2 or 3 generations can appreciate. It's because the Simpsons have been in there forever, and
Right.
they've been popular for a while. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So how has life been for you over the last 2 months? Are you still working a regular schedule, or mostly working from home, or?
It's completely turned upside down for me, because my normal schedule is I'll leave Monday morning, stay up, because I live 2.5 hours from my job, so I'll stay up there Monday through Thursday, and then come home late Thursday night. Sometimes I'll go back and forth if I can, but I'm gone more than I'd like to be. And this new schedule is 15 feet that way. I've been working from home, which is nice. But whenever you've got 4 kids who are also, doing distance learning with Zoom classes,
There's a lot of strain on the internet feed.
Not the internet's not as bad as, okay, I have to get on the phone call right now. And whenever we have a lot of older people that we work with, because it's engineering and stuff like that. It's like, I don't like this typing stuff. Just give me a call. I'm like, I have 4 kids who just got off school and are playing video games. I am not giving you a call. You're going to have to type. I'm very sorry. But it's a very different scenario for us. But being home with my family more is really, really nice. I enjoy that very much. I'm not used to that. And I think there's a lot of people that are getting put in different positions for this. And, they're taking a look at their lives and kind of assessing things and going, maybe I need to make some changes. And, hopefully that can be the silver lining that comes out of this, as people start doing things that they like more instead of what they feel like they have to do. Because I think, society in general has been busy, 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 hustle, hustle, hustle. And I've been very guilty of that. And instead of just I don't have to do that tonight. Let's watch a
Yeah.
movie with the kids, or let's play some video games. So I'm
No.
trying to
Yeah.
do that and finding the good.
Yeah. Things have definitely moved at a slower pace. I think for everybody, regardless of what situation you're in, there's less going on than there was a little while ago. I don't know if you can see the comments on the screen, but Crabtree says, "Hey, you guys." So I think we
Hey,
have
you
to.
guys.
Yeah, I think we have to assume that he said it as Sloth from the Goonies.
Of course. And not a heavy joke, but let's acknowledge the elephant in the room, Crabtree.
He's not an elephant. He's I don't know,
Giraffe.
rhinoceros.
Yeah, that's accurate right there. I've rolled with the guy. That is accurate.
Yeah. Yeah. He's a big man.
Yep.
So let's talk a little
Big
bit
man,
about
big heart.
Yeah. He's got like what's that racehorse that's heart was so big that it exploded?
Yeah. I wasn't going with it that way, but yeah.
I'm kidding.
Oh yeah. We love you, Matt.
This is true. So let's talk a little bit about all of the conventions and stuff that have been canceled and postponed, because you're somebody that tends to travel more than probably most people do, and hit up a lot of the bigger cons. And if I'm not mistaken, you did go to C2E2 this year, right?
Yeah, that was like right on the edge.
Right.
I mean, it was kind of one of those things that we were aware that this was going on in other parts of the world. But there's a lot of times that, that Europe and China and stuff like that have stuff going on that's like, oh, wow, that really sucks. I hope that things go better for them and things work out.
Right.
And it's just kind of, it hit home this time. And yeah, C2E2 was on the way home. We were starting to hear, hey, there may be things changing because of this. And probably, I think it was like within a week of that they started, showing up that some states were not shutting down, because that was just so far from what we in the United States had seen happen before. I don't know if we've had anything that has done this before.
Not in 100 years.
Yeah, exactly. It was a very different world. Even the world 20 years ago was so drastically different with the onset of the internet and stuff like that. It's just kind of hard to fathom. But yeah, went to C2E2, very glad, because I haven't taken any pictures since then, and I've been jonesing hard for it. So I think got that batch of stuff to work on.
Yeah, for anyone that's not been to C2E2 before, it's held in a convention center called McCormick Place, which, if I'm not mistaken, is the largest convention center in North America, or at least in the Midwest. Like it's a very big building, and I'm sure that when you were there a month and a half, 2 months ago, that the idea that a month later it would be being turned into an emergency hospital would that
wouldn't have even crossed my mind.
Right. So, I mean, anybody that's ever been there before knows just how enormous that building is, and it's kind of hard to imagine that that space being used for that kind of emergency purpose.
And I think it's really good that they're able to do that and to use that space for to be able to help, instead of just leaving it empty like that. And I've heard of other big convention places. I think the one in Florida maybe. That is also having the same thing, and which is insane.
Yeah, the Columbus Convention Center was mentioned as a possible source for something like that, but luckily that, as of now, has not come to pass, and seems unlikely to be an issue in Ohio. But we just don't know, because it's it's something that's changing every day, but so there are several other.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. There's just enough of a delay in the talk that it kind of makes it hard to talk over people. So there have been a handful of other conventions and stuff that have been canceled and postponed and stuff. And as an average con goer, we kind of think about like it's kind of disappointing because we're missing that form of entertainment. But there are also a lot of people whose livelihood are really directly connected to these events, and it's in ways that you might not necessarily think of, because it's also the vendors and things like that, but a lot of the guests,
Yeah.
like that's their job now, attending events like that. But it's also the organizers, it's the concession stand workers, it's the janitors. I mean, it's even security guards and things like that. So all these events being canceled is putting a big strain on a lot of people. And obviously these are not decisions that people have made lightly, because some people are taking pretty big financial hits for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like you said, there's a lot of people that we don't even realize that this is influencing right now, that this is touching their lives. But like you said, in addition to those, I mean, there's the people who go and cover conventions. A lot of those websites are having very difficult times because they don't have anything, and some of the Facebook groups that I'm involved with that, are multiple sites, and they're like, hey, if you guys have any ideas, we don't have anything to cover because there's no movies coming out right now. So they
Right.
don't have those to cover for their websites. There's no comic books because the comic book industry is like in flames right now.
Right.
And,
And,
AMC
and other
shut down. I
businesses
mean,
don't have anything to advertise, so those businesses can't
mhm.
rely on their normal advertisers, because if your business is closed, or even just work, still open but working at a fraction of what it has been doing, then you don't necessarily have the extra money to go into that advertising as well.
That's exactly it. A lot of YouTubers that I follow, because that's probably, we don't have cable, so that's probably the main source of where I get my information from, is YouTube and the internet, of course. But a lot of them have said that this is kind of the time of the year. January is always rough, but February on kind of really starts picking up. And they're taking like a 75 to 90% hit in their revenue there. So we're doing the same amount of work, but advertisers just aren't there right now. And I mean, it's just this massive ripple effect where we don't realize that this hits these people until we hear them saying something about it and go, oh yeah, that is directly affected with that,
Yeah, it really is. And building on what you're saying with the YouTube ad revenue and things like that, now this isn't something I know a tremendous amount about, but my understanding is that a lot of that payout stuff was like what the creators were actually making, both through the YouTube ad revenue and things like Amazon affiliates, which is another big kind of money maker for online content creators. That those commissions have been cut before all this kind of stuff happened, or at least in the United States. Maybe it was influenced by what was going on in Europe and Asia already, but that's an additional hit to some of those people that are making a living off creating content like that.
And even I do the Amazon FBA thing where you can buy items and then sell them, send them into Amazon warehouse, and they fulfill that through their warehouse. And Amazon has shut that down, sending in new product, as long as it's not if it's a non-essential product, whatever they deem that to be, then they don't even have it to where you can send it in. And the ones that you can send in, you're severely restricted on what you can charge. And I don't sell any of that stuff. I'm not approved for that. But that was kind of a side business for me that, I kind of counted on that to help pay the studio rent and all that sort of stuff. And that's dried up here lately. I haven't been able to send anything in for months now. And it's just kind of like a ripple thing. You don't understand what it will affect until something like this happens. And it just kind of like one more thing, and it keeps going and going and going. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is a huge deal. And I don't think we will really understand that until it's completely passed. I'd say probably into next year, whenever we can look back at the data that they're collecting now and hopefully be better prepared in the future for something like this, and get steps and things in place to where this won't hit us again the next time something like this comes up.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, speaking of Amazon, I'm sure anybody that's been stuck kind of working from home right now, that has been trying to get on Amazon to buy, anything sort of work from home related, whether it be webcams, computers, headsets, things like that. I mean, all that stuff is sold out and backed up for months and months. I know I've picked up a few things like that myself over the last month and a half, and you really kind of got to keep an eye on it. And if something pops up in
Mm-hmm.
stock, if you need it, you got to jump on it because it might be, there's no 2-day shipping right now. It's 2-week shipping if you're lucky.
And it kind of feels like using the Wish app all over again whenever I order something from Amazon and it gets here almost 2 weeks later and it was like, hey, you got a package. What is it? And I was like, I don't remember what I ordered. That was like a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. And I'll open it up. I was like, oh, yeah, I do need that. So it's just like,
Yeah.
like this like sick Christmas all over again. It's like, hey, this is something I need, but that was a long time ago. So it's funny how we kind of have gotten reliant on the way that things were, and I think that there's going to be a new normal that gets shaken out of this, but I don't think things are going to go back to exactly the way things were. It's going to be interesting to see how all this shakes out.
Yeah. Well, the one thing that I will say that is interesting in a good way is things like this tend to force technology forward and businesses forward and things like that. And there's going to be things come out of this that make the world, hopefully better, but certainly different. That are things that you wouldn't necessarily think of. That we would have a hard time imagining right now.
Even for just me personally, I would have never thought in a million years that an entire engineering company, which is what I do for my day job, I'm one of their IT guys, and that an entire engineering company in construction can have all of their laptops and desktops, put to where the users set them up at home and dial in with VPN and all that good stuff, and it works. The first week was hell getting everybody, because we weren't going to the users' homes. We were just helping them get connected through VPN and getting this stuff set up, and microphones that they would have went out and bought. Just troubleshooting hardware remotely is always such a difficult thing. But it's been pretty smooth lately. I would have never thought that would have been possible. And a lot of people are finding a new, like I said, a new normal. And we'll see how things go from here. Even with kids in school, I have 4 kids personally, and to see them be able to still do distance learning and stuff like that, that's really blown my mind. I would have never thought that would have been something that could be workable, but I mean, here they are doing it. So it's interesting what we're capable of when we have to.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think it'll force, of course, the schools are going to have to deal with budget cuts now, at least in Ohio and probably throughout most of the country. But it shows how necessary it is for them to have, say, computers or tablets or something that the kids can take home with them, and they need to be able to have access to the internet when they're at home, not just when they're at school. And living in southeastern Ohio, there's a lot of places where the internet service is not great at best, and some places that just don't have it at all. And this is forcing us to realize the necessity of that. And I can, that's something that I definitely think we're going to probably see improve a lot in a relatively short period of time.
And I think there's a lot of companies that see that. Personally, we have T-Mobile, and they have an initiative that they've been doing here lately. We just found out about it last year, where they're bringing their remote 5G service to rural. That's a difficult word to say. Country areas.
The 5G internet is, once that kind of goes everywhere, that's really going to change a lot of things in ways that I don't think people expect. I mean, the reason that a lot of the things that we're able to do on the internet today that we take for granted, whether it be, live streaming video like we're doing right now, or, online gaming and things like that, the only reason that is possible is because internet has continued to get stronger, faster, more efficient, and things like that. And a lot of these things that, people would not have even thought was a possibility, say 10 years ago, that now is a normal thing. And once that 5G internet becomes more common everywhere, we're going to see effects of that are not things that we're even thinking about right now.
Absolutely. I mean, I was looking at the other day, just kind of, with my wife was sitting on the couch on her device. The kids were streaming something through a Roku on TV. I was uploading pictures on my computer while I was streaming YouTube and, working on something. And just like almost everybody was using some sort of, data of some sort. And here we are out in the middle of freaking nowhere in Ohio and still have decent connection. And if nothing else, I think things like that and fiber, getting moved into the city areas and kind of spreading out the backbone from there, I think that'll put pressure on the existing data providers and going, okay, we need to step up our game. We've got some competition now. And I think it will be good for everybody all the way around to have this available, because there's, like you said, there's so many things now. Whenever my YouTube on my phone kicks down from 1080 and I see it blur up a little bit because it went to 480, it's like, what's this bull crap? Come on, And back in the day, that was like, that was the primo, that was the high end stuff,
Yeah.
All right. It's like my kid, whenever they see a commercial, it's like, what is this?
All right, well, let's get into talking about some photography stuff now. So you sent in a few photos to me. So you said these were some of your recent stuff that you were particularly proud of. It looks like we've got a senior picture here.
Yeah, that was one of my older seniors for that one. Just I've been wanting to get more back into seniors, but that set right there I was pretty happy with. I don't shoot on train tracks anymore, but
ever since you got hit by a train that one time.
I did not get hit by a train, but getting a police chopper called on you will kind of sour you from staying. That's another story for another time. But that's like, okay, I'm good. We don't need to do that anymore. But I really like this one in particular because it kind of merges my cosplay style with seniors and stuff like that. And it's I feel this is really indicative of my style. I'm really proud of this particular set.
So you want to talk maybe a little? So is this how do you have this lit? Is this all natural light, or you have a light on them to get that kind of shadow around the face?
I never do natural light.
Yeah.
This is just one soft box, though. This is just like, I calibrate for the background, of course. Whenever you're shooting with the light, I'll get the clouds and stuff like that looking the way that I want to. Then I know from that how much light that I need in my soft box. So I'll kind of stop things down. I think that those are usually about f13 is typically what I'm shooting at in that. And, I'll have the softbox. Usually the parent or a sibling will hold the softbox, and I'll kind of direct them where to go.
Yeah.
And, use whatever ambient light that you can, but whenever you're calibrating for that, you always need, at least the way that I shoot typically, you always need a little pop of light to kind of get that separation and that look.
Yeah. So you shoot for expose for the lightest part of your image, and then fill in with your own light. So here's some cosplay stuff. And this is this from? You said this was a pretty recent one. Is this from C2E2 also?
Yeah, I think the rest of them were probably from C2E2. This was Disfusional, and which is a weird word to say, but I met her at the after party in the lobby the night before. She was talking to some friends of ours, and as I walked up to the group, I heard her saying, that she brought a scarecrow. She said, I really need to find somebody who just really loves to shoot creepy looking stuff. She said, because I'm really needing some creepy lighting on this. And three of my friends turned towards me. They was like, hey, talk to this guy. So I just kind of walked up in the middle of the conversation. I'm like, wait, what? And she told me, and I was like, yes, I have no clue who you are or what this looks like, but I would absolutely love to shoot this with you. Yeah, so she did a fantastic job.
It's a pretty awesome face prosthetic.
That was more intense than what I expected. I saw her from behind, and I'm like, oh, that's really cool, because the bottom of the costume, I don't know if you can see it, but it kind of flares up, and the hem of it kind of curls up, and she had wires in it to whenever she would move, it kind of had that twirling look in it, but and then she had lights and stuff like that in her gauntlet on her left hand.
Practical lights here.
And I had a flash behind it, so it would pop and kind of accentuate that.
So I don't know. This is kind of a nerdy photography question. So how do you treat something like this? These little LEDs that she has in the gauntlet, and not just completely kill that light with your flash.
For me, I have to use since I'm cranking down the aperture to be able to black out the background, because this was shooting in the middle of the convention area. This was like people walking around behind, and one of the videos or one of the clips that we'll have in just a little bit will show, okay, this is where we shot that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have people walking around in the background, so I've got to crank down that aperture to control that. But to get the LEDs and lightsabers and stuff like that as well, what I have to do is you got to drop your shutter speed to be able to let as much light as possible in, which is difficult because I shoot everything handheld. I don't use tripods and stuff because it's just too difficult to go and set everything up and to be able to move from shot to shot to shot the way that I personally shoot. So it's just kind of like practicing with that over years and kind of getting used to, okay, this is what this is. I know I have to do this. And that can also let you do some interesting stuff with, like shutter drags and moving left and right with that slow shutter speed and still having that flash to pop and freeze it.
Yeah.
It's an interesting little dance that you've got to do to get everything working that way. But I was happy with the way it turned out.
I find dealing with practical, like especially a light like that that's not very bright, to be a very challenging experience. So here's another one. This looks like this is also from C2E2, kind of a similar setup.
Yep.
A little bit different angle here.
Yep, that's Oakenshield, and she was doing Jester from Critical Role, which is one of my favorite fandoms. And she's a very bouncy, fun, charismatic character, and she always reads a lot of dirty books. So that was kind of like, just reading one, I was like, and I love the gradient work that she did in her in dyeing this. She had a lot of textures and stuff like that. A lot of props that she brought. She brought like a donut and a cupcake and a lollipop and just some stuff very, very for the character. And I love that whenever people are able to do that with shoots, because that gives us some fun stuff that we can kind of play with, especially if it's a fandom that I'm intimately familiar with, and love. It's like, oh yeah, remember this time that they did this? Yeah, let's do this. So,
so this one we've got a little behind the scenes clip here. So you can talk about your lighting a little bit. I see you've looks like you've got a key light, a side light, and then you've got a gel light hitting the floor to get this glowing green down here.
Yep. And I didn't send you any proofs or anything like that, but I've started since the quarantine has set in, going through, because I record almost all of my shoots like this at conventions. I've started going back through them and making like YouTube videos out of them, where it shows, okay, here's not only the behind the scenes stuff, but I'll have like little pointers to the flashes that you can see and say, okay, this was at this power. And whenever I take this shot, you'll be able to see the unedited proof go up. Then I'll have another picture with the EXIF data on it, so you can see what settings it was, and then it'll spin into the final image. So that it gives you like a more complete sense of, this is where it was shot. Here's the how it was shot. Because whenever I started learning photography, it was through YouTube. So I want to, and the handful of people back then, there wasn't very many people 10 years ago that was going and putting free YouTube content that was easily understandable, small chunk, digestible. Here you go practice this and learn. Nowadays, that's common. I mean, there's so many different things online. Yeah, there you go. That's Termina Cosplay, and that's kind of an example of some of the shoots that I've done. And if you look on the right-hand side on that rail, if you look on the right-hand side, you could see like this big lump of something hooked onto the rail, and that was a homemade little thing that I put together, because Katsucon is very strict on their no light stand policy, which is a pain in the butt. And that's why the little soft boxes in the background and the pop of color on the background is through the little gelled thing on your right there.
Yeah. There's not really I don't really have any way to point at it, but we see what you're talking about there. And so this is the kind of thing you've been doing on YouTube recently, which I think is fun.
It's been interesting learning a new skill set too. I've wanted to do video for a while. I've got 1.5 years worth of videos. I've got almost 200 editing sessions that I just record as I'm editing. I'm like, I'll have time to do this someday. I want to get content with this, because you don't want it to be, okay, I have time to make content. Now I need to learn how to do this. You want to have as much stuff as possibly banked up as that way whenever you do have time, it's like, okay, cool. Let's take some steps on this. So I spent like almost 2 weeks other than my day job, in the evenings and stuff like that, straight, just kind of trying different editing things. I'd use Filmora a little bit as far as editing software, and it's okay, but I wanted to dive a little bit more into it. So I started looking at Adobe Premiere, and that's a little bit of a price jump that I wasn't currently able to do with not bringing in any money with photography right now.
Yeah.
So I settled on DaVinci, which is put out by Blackmagic, and that's a free software, but incredibly in depth. It's like, oh my God, it's a bit of a learning curve, because it is a full-fledged editing suite, but I'm really happy with it, and just kind of learning the ins and outs of it, and what's good. And once I try to render something, it'll pop up an error. It's like, I have no clue what this is. So I'll have to, kind of do some Googling and find out. It's like, oh, okay, that makes that. So I got to do it this way. But I'm happy with it. And I hope that people will be able to take a look at this and go, oh, okay, this is kind of interesting, and be able to take a little bit from here and then start on their own journey to find their own style and use what I'm putting out there as an instructional thing, and to learn, because I want to give back, I want to, that's the way that I learned. And I want to be able to put more information out there, even though there's a ton of it already out there. Maybe specifically for cosplay, if somebody's looking to start shooting cosplayers, it's like, you can do that anywhere.
Right. So talking about giving back a little bit, probably, I'm sure you get asked this question all the time about what kind of camera gear you use, or what kind of camera gear that you expect people buying. And I know you've kind of been shopping around a little bit, maybe to update some of your gear maybe in the next year or so. So I thought maybe we would just kind of go through and kind of give our thoughts on, some of the different camera gear that's out there, what sort of cameras we recommend, what sort of gear we think is an actual necessity to have, and what other things is maybe just something that's going to take up space in your bag. So I don't know if you want to maybe talk about the gear that you have, or gear that you used to have.
Yeah, right now I had planned on being able to update my gear shortly because of some contracts and stuff like that for conventions, and through some local contracts for businesses this year. And now all of that, of course, has been put on hold. Thankfully, all of them have been like, yeah, we'll just roll it into next year. That's fine. So that's not a concern. But I'm glad I didn't spend the money that I didn't have at the time, because that would have been real problems now moving into that. So sorry, my laptop's starting to fall. But I'm glad I didn't do that, even though it means waiting a year to update my gear, because I've shot with the same camera for 5 years, I think. And it's a Nikon D7000 is what I use now, which is an older model camera. I think it's almost like 10 years old, maybe. And I purchased mine new. I purchased mine new about 5 years ago. So I looked, and whenever I do plan on updating to, through some talks with you and a few other people, I think I'm going to go with a Sony A7 series. I've been looking at the A7 III, and hopefully, that'll work out next year. I see it. I was checking the news the other day, and it's like Sony to come out with a new mirrorless camera. I was like, no, you don't. No, I don't need the latest and greatest. But at the time that I got my Nikon, the 7100 had just come out, and that's something that I recommend people doing if they're looking at something. Take a look at what's coming out, because I waited, I think, 2 months, and it was supposed to be like $1,200 for the body, and I waited until the 7100 came out, and the price dropped to like $795, I think. So you can save a lot of change that way if you kind of just do a little bit of research. There's so many websites out there that document this thoroughly, and like that's what they do. They stay on this stuff and they let you know. So if it's spring and they're bringing out a new camera in the summer. You may want to wait, because the cost that you could save could be a nice lens or something like that. Because a lot of times, lenses, you have to invest in decent glass, to be able to do that. And lenses aren't cheap.
Yeah. The another thing to kind of keep in mind is we're talking about buying used gear. Sometimes those model the new releases for the camera body, sometimes they are a really big step forward in the technology, but a lot of times they're a relatively minor step forward. But still, the bodies, every 5 years or so, the bodies start to become relatively dated. That's not really the case with lenses. I mean, you may be sacrificing some autofocus capabilities, but ultimately, you could be using camera lenses that are 50 years old and achieving sharp images.
And sometimes using those using those lenses too can give you interesting, very unique looks, because I know that people that specialize in using vintage lenses, because of the particular light leaks or functionality of some of them, give it like a real unique look. And they even make filters and stuff like that on your smartphone that emulate some of this stuff. So it's not only popular, but they're making software that what was considered, okay, this is something you kind of need to avoid or to be careful of. People want that look because it's nostalgia to them.
One thing that Fujifilm does that's really interesting, and pretty much all of their digital cameras, is generally in cameras they have what they call like picture profiles. So it'll be one that has like more saturation or one that has more contrast or whatever. Fujifilm calls them film simulations, and they are all inspired by Fujifilm film from years past. And some of the cameras, it's one of the I don't know, it's one of the X Pro bodies, maybe, I can't remember exactly what it's called. But the it doesn't have like a normal LCD screen on the back. It just displays the label of the film that you are using.
Oh wow!
so
That's cool.
It's like so it's like an old film camera that you just has a little window kind of there on the side, so you can see what you have loaded into it. It kind of is emulating that.
That's cool. The one of the first, I call it my first big boy camera. Because my first actual camera was an Olympus kind of point and shoot. It was like a mega zoom. It was not a removable lens, DSLR and all that good stuff. So I started using that for some of my really, really early seniors and stuff. And my first DSLR camera was given to me by a photographer friend of mine who was choosing to go out of business at that time to pursue something else. And he had seen my work and was like, I didn't even know that you liked photography. I'm like, I didn't either. This is something that's really very recent, and I'm just trying it out. And he was like, well, here's a Fuji S3 Pro is what I've used, which is a crazy good camera. And he was like, here, you can do this. Here's a lens for you. And, that way you can start practicing. And I love Fuji as far as the body and stuff like that. Yeah, I've actually got it sitting over there underneath the pile of stuff. That's going to go on a shelf. That's going to go on a shelf at the studio whenever I get that set up. Yeah. But I always tell people that
that was a beefy camera.
It's a horse. It's a big camera, especially I don't have the battery pack for it, but the person that gave it to me had the battery hookup on the bottom. It's a dual sensor camera, if I'm not mistaken, which was really great for what you were talking about, the film emulation and stuff like that, because they had a mode that was basically kind of an HDR, a high dynamic range, where it took a picture with both sensors and then combined that. So you could really crank up the contrast and the saturation and stuff like that. And to get that really rich and contrasty Fuji film. I've never shot film particularly, but I do know that for decades Fuji was seen as the best, pretty much, as far as their film and stuff like that. For that reason, if you wanted that high contrast and punch and saturation and deep colors, I kind of miss that sometimes. because the stuff that I was getting directly from my camera was crazy. The raw file on that was 25 to 30 megs because it was taking two sensors worth of data and combining it.
Yeah.
But the buffer on that is ultimately why I had to switch, because it would, whenever I started shooting weddings, hate shooting weddings. Whenever I started shooting weddings, if you took 3, maybe 4 images, it would fill the buffer up on that camera, and it would lock up for almost a minute while it wrote those images to the disk, and then you could start shooting. And in a wedding, you have to be that selective. I mean, I'm selective in my shooting, but that was pushing it, because if I took 2 quick shots and then I would notice something else going on and have to get this shot, I always had that in the back of my mind. And at weddings, you don't get a second chance. That's just so much stress to have to do that. And I always tell people that don't look to upgrade until you have a reason for it. Don't just be like, hey, I want the latest and greatest, because there's always going to be something new coming out. There's always going to be some shiny thing that's always going to be super expensive. But because of the hardware limitations on that, the buffer size, and it used, what was the big square media cards? It's not a C,
it was
not a
probably
CFast, but
it was probably a proprietary card, because I know Sony back in the day used to have those like memory sticks, kind of looked like a piece of bubble gum. It was like an SD card, but it was like 3 times as long. Yeah, that's kind of a funny thing. Like the early days of digital cameras, they really could not decide on a memory format. If you could remember,
and everybody was wanting theirs.
Right. And if you could remember, there were a handful of cameras that like opened up like that, and you like put a CD inside of it, and it would write the images directly to a disc. Which is crazy when you think about it, because it's like even laptops don't come with CDs and disk drives nowadays, because that's kind of an obsolete. People still use it, but it's a bit of an obsolete technology. Yeah. Yeah, it's really amazing how far that stuff has really come in a short period of time. And I think looking at smartphone photography is one of the best kind of examples of just how amazing this stuff is getting and how far it's come. There are certainly things that like an SLR camera can do that your phone camera can't do. But at the same time, the computing power and the processing power and things like that in your phone is light years ahead of what is in even, a top of the line, like mirrorless, like SLR style camera now.
Yeah. And the apps, even the free apps that people use to edit things, it's unbelievable how much you can do with something that's free, and no ads, no sneaky stuff, whatever. Just like,
normally the free ones have some ads and sneaky stuff in them.
Some of them do, but every now and then you find one. I wish that I could remember the name of the one that I use now. I'm totally blanking on that.
I've gotten in a little bit to using a Lightroom mobile now, since I have the iPad now. And the cool thing about that is you can start your edits on the tablet, and then it just automatically all syncs into your computer, so when you get home or whatever and you sit down at the computer, all your files are there, and all of the work that you've already started is already there. And that's a pretty amazing thing, considering that you can it can be your camera and your computer almost.
Yeah, I mean it's like you said, just the amount of stuff that they're able to do with something that can literally fit in your pocket. Right. Is just it blows my mind. And even the cameras themselves and the lenses and the quality of the hardware and the sensors and stuff that they're starting to put in the new cameras. I'm notorious for getting something and sticking with it forever and then upgrading. Like I said, my D7000 is about 10 years old, I think, and I'm going to be jumping about 8 generations of camera to the Sony that I upgrade next year. So I was kind of the same way with my iPhone. I had a iPhone 6, not the 6S or whatever, just a regular 6. And we just upgraded to 11s here this past year. And it was night and day difference. I mean, I'm looking at the pictures and stuff like that, and kind of zooming in and like kicking them over to my computer and pixel peeping a little bit. It's like, wow, this is, this isn't comparable to my DSLR in some ways, but this is a horse to just have it, and to be able to just have it with you on the fly. And that's one that I took a few weeks ago with my wife, and I did that with my iPhone. And Snapseed, that's the name of the editing software that I use. So it's free, and you can do. I opened it up from here, and I hadn't used it for almost a year, and I was like, oh wow, there's a lot more stuff in here than I remember. So it's got a lot of different controls that you can do. I always like the real punchy, contrasty clouds and sky and stuff like that. So I'm really happy with the stuff that I can do. Even if I leave my camera at home, I've always got my camera with me in my pocket, at least with my my phone.
Everybody does now.
And I've recently purchased a 360 camera to start playing around with that, and trying some stuff at conventions for both documenting, just like, okay, here's this convention, but I also had some neat stuff. If I set it up in front of me during a shoot, I can split the screen and have at the same time. You can see the person, and then you can also see me kind of directing them. So I think that would be helpful. Hey, Tiny Planet stuff, and learning how to do that. So,
looks like you're throwing
just being
up a
able
gang
to
sign, but I think that's just the selfie stick.
It's the selfie stick. Yeah, it has something called an invisible selfie stick, and because of the angle of it, it knows to take out this very, very small portion of the thing to take that out and kind of heal that in. So I've seen people get creative on how to hook that up. I saw one guy who had a friend of his dressed up as like a video game character, and they had hooked it to his back. So as he was like walking through the woods, it kind of had that third person over the shoulder view, so it looked like a legit video game. And he'd turn, and it had him like kind of doing the memes. It's like, okay, walking up against the wall, and then, turning around here. And it was pretty funny. So I think for conventions in particular, and, for shooting outdoors and stuff like that, it should have some interesting stuff to play with. It's a totally different format and different thing to do, and I think it'll be fun to play with. So give me something else that I can offer people.
Crabtree's asking if you've ever used the drone.
I have not used a drone. I have wanted to, but that's an expensive hobby to get into. Back a couple years ago, whenever it first got hot, I didn't have the money for it, and now I still don't have the money for it. But there's a lot of regulations and stuff like that they've been bringing down the last year in particular, that some of my friends up in Canada have made videos about it, and it's really bad in Canada. It's like,
the laws are
holy
stricter.
crap.
The laws are stricter in Canada than they are here. They've really restricted like recreational flying. Flying just for fun. Here in the United States, just flying for fun is really not regulated all that much. It's when you get into flying professionally that it is regulated quite a bit harsher. One of the things that I've been doing actually during my quarantine is taking an online class to study for the Part 107 certificate, which is what you need to be a commercial drone pilot, so that we can start using it for some of the stuff that we're doing at work for the news and some of the other clients that we have. And I can tell you, it's not really a fun thing to have to be studying for. You have to, I don't know how much you've looked into it, but you have to learn to read flight like charts. You have to understand all of the different types of airspaces. You have to understand all of these latitude and longitude lines. It's the flight maps are a confusing thing, and you have to understand them pretty well. I think I might be able to bring up one here real quick.
Well, the good thing about that is, since you're doing that, I think that there's a lot of people who are using this time. Yeah, see, I looked briefly into that, and I'm like, I'm not going to learn this. This is nuts.
All right, so this is the type of map that you have to learn how to read if you want to be a commercial drone pilot. So what I can tell you is that these circles here are indicating a type of airspace, and the same thing with this dashed line here is another type of airspace. And then you see these fractions here. This is also telling you like how far above sea level or that the airspace takes effect and things like that. So it's a lot.
I watch a lot of stuff from Peter McKinnon on YouTube, and whenever all this stuff started hitting, he actually had one of his friends who had just completed the course, and he was like, "Yeah, we're just going to go out and fly some drones today, man," because that was kind of one of Peter's things, is he would always get like these crazy B-roll drone shots, and so it showed him going out, and it was unloading, and the guy took like these little orange cones and set up a perimeter around there, and he spread out his maps, and he had like a radio that he had to have tuned to the nearest air traffic controller and all this other stuff. And Peter's like, what are you doing? And it was like going back and forth, and the gag was, "Oh, you don't do this?" He's like, "I don't even know what this is," So
you don't have to set up a landing pad in the U.S. And the radios are not a requirement, but it is something that you can have in case of certain situations you might need it. But that's not a required thing in the United States, especially if you're just flying for fun.
And I think that what's the limit? Is it 20 ounces or 22 ounces? It's like the weight of the actual drone itself is kind of what regulates whether it's a professional drone or for fun.
I don't remember exactly what the weight is, but if you're not aware of this, DJI just released a drone called the Mavic Mini, which is literally like 1 ounce below that.
1 ounce below. I saw that and I was like, why is this a big deal? And then they had somebody that's like, oh man, they got it.
Right. But all that, I mean, that doesn't release you from having to have that certificate to use it professionally. It just means you don't have to register the drone, which is not a difficult process to do. It only costs like $5 or something like that. And then you have to display that registration number on it. So it's not like that's actually all that big of an issue, but
that's their marketing department going, "Oh man, we can make some money here."
Drones are definitely a case where the technology is moving much, much faster than the regulations can. I mean, you pay any attention to anything, how long and how difficult it is to get, a bill through Congress. And, these guys are releasing like 4 new drones a year, and they're just like pushing the technology, like what these things can accomplish. And, and then up until last year, they were regulating this stuff based on a law that was like decades old that really only applied to like model airplanes.
And none of the people making the laws understand anything whatsoever about technology that they're used for.
No.
So like, oh yeah, we can only let the little ones go. I was like, have you ever seen a Cinewhoop and what they can do with those things? Like the racing drones that have the GoPros on them. I was addicted for about 2 weeks of like, that's pretty much all that I watched. And I mean, just seeing the guys who would go out and do this sort of stuff, they would travel the world and they would come visit, Sri Lanka or whatever videos, and they would get flown out and get paid to do this stuff because they were so good. And I think, like you said earlier, where you're going to do that and get certified with it, I think the people with that certification moving forward as things go, once they make the law and find out, oh crap, people are still doing this, well, we got to make it more hard here and we got to make it harder here. And I think the people who have went through that and do have the certification and keep up with that would be a very good feather to have in your hat. And another offering to where, even if it's not necessarily for you directly, there's people out there who make videos. I was like, I just need 1 day's worth of B-roll or to have us do this. Let me find somebody who specializes in that, and I mean, that's something that you could kind of rent out your services for, especially the more difficult that it is and the higher that you can charge for that,
Right. Yeah. And then as far as, that test to get the certification to do that, it's not a one-time thing. You have to do it again every 2 years. So it's a lot. Yeah. It's a lot. it's a big undertaking learning that stuff. And of course, that exam has nothing to do with showing that you're a competent pilot. There's no
Oh
there's no
yeah.
like there's no like actual flying part to the test. You don't have to actually get out and
Mm-hmm.
show that you can navigate certain situations or whatever. It's just
Mm-hmm.
showing that you understand the laws of air travel, basically.
And it's funny how they care so much about this stuff. It was like, okay, and then whenever it's the actual stuff, it's like, but can you show us that you can fly? Yeah, yeah, you don't have to do that.
All right. So, one thing that I think a lot of us have gotten to know better over the last month or so, while all of this stuff has been going on, is most states have
Mm-hmm.
had their governor has been making public addresses and things like that more frequently. So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people are getting to know their governor for the first time. And so you and I were both at an event a couple months ago, back in February, I believe, where
Mm-hmm.
the Ohio governor, Mike DeWine's wife, was making an appearance at a public library. And and I had the opportunity to do a little interview with her after the event was over. And while I was doing my thing here,
You gonna
find it.
narc me out here?
Yeah, there's so so here we are, and here, if you notice here in the corner behind there's the portrait dude, and there he is again, photobombing the Ohio First Lady.
You know, I didn't realize that you were shooting quite that wide. Apologies for that. Normally,
That
my
was
photographer senses tingle and go, "You're in a
yeah.
shot. You need to move." But I had no clue. I was oblivious.
That was that when I got home and started going through this footage, you you doing that, I think it made my day.
It's like, daggone it, I can't put enough blur on this to get this guy out of here.
No.
Got to use a Harry filter, and I just completely disappear.
There you are, just wandering
But
around in
yeah,
the background.
and the funny thing is, I mean, I was familiar with who Governor DeWine was, of course, but I had not really had any, not interaction, but really seen much from him. And ever since this has started, because he was kind of one of the first ones at the forefront of this about making decisions and kind of shutting stuff down. And I mean, I've watched a lot of the live streams and stuff like that and kept
Yeah.
up to date through that. And it's just like, okay, well, yeah, I think that this is people being more familiar with the people who are in office, and whether it's I agree with this and I need to vote for them to make sure that they get back, or I disagree with this person, they're an idiot and they need to get out. I mean, I think that people are becoming more aware politically through this,
Yeah.
for better or worse. Well, not for
Yeah.
better or worse. I think that that's always a good thing. Awareness is always a good thing. But I think that whenever people are able to vote, I really think and hope that there's a more of a movement for people to go out and to use their voice and to vote, no matter which side that you do, no matter what you believe in. I think using your voice is a very important thing.
All right. Well, we're closing in on an hour now, so I probably ought to let you get out of here. Is there anything you want to plug before we head out?
Not a whole lot. I've been putting some stuff, like I said, on my YouTube channel, which is youtube.theportraitdude.com. It's an easy way to find it, or you can just get on YouTube and search The Portrait Dude. And I'm also starting to blog more on my stuff to kind of take the videos that I'm putting out there and kind of get some information from the cosplayers and put them together in a package to where you can go and take a look at the stuff that I shoot. You can take a look at the proofs. You can look at the exif data, because in the videos they kind of flip by pretty quick. So I want to make a gallery of them to where people can do that, and I plan on doing that a lot more because I enjoy it, and it's always been I don't have time to do this. And if nothing else, I think the quarantine has kind of showed us that you can slow down a little bit. You don't have to do all the stuff that you're doing. You can take a couple hours a week and make time to learn something new, and to do what you're doing. So my main website is theportraitdude.net. That's where all my blog stuff is at, and it's called the Not So Daily Dude because I am not posting daily.
Maybe you've already capped this. I don't remember, but I think I saw a couple weeks ago where you were posting that once you were allowed to operate like as a business again, that you were planning on booking some shoots in your studio to kind of make up for some of the lost convention time. Is that something that is still up for grabs, or have you filled all that up?
No, absolutely. That's kind of an ongoing thing because, you'll have a bunch of people say, oh, yeah, I'm interested. And then whenever you put it out there, of course, that's a fraction of that. So that's just kind of a thing of me gauging interest of people and to know who to contact, because social media, you can't count on that getting out there and reaching anybody anymore. So, but no, that's I guess I should put something on my website about that. But yeah, just check theportraitdude.net. Or email me at theportraitdude@gmail.com if you're interested. I've got probably 25 to 30 people who said that they were interested in some studio stuff. And, that's something else, like whenever we first started, about people being affected, cosplayers who sell prints and they need like new, fresh content and stuff to put out. Conventions are typically where they get that, and they're not going to be able to do that. So, I mean, I've got people from like Idaho. I've got a couple people from there, Chicago, some East Coast stuff who were saying, whenever you open your studio, let me know. We'll bring 4 or 5 outfits that they're making now during quarantine. And they're going to be like, yeah, I'll have like half a dozen costumes to shoot. So we'll probably just make a day of it. And then that way they're going to be set up for content for a few months from there. And I'd actually like to start doing that more, because if people can come in and bring a lot of the stuff that they need shot, get some quality stuff of that, I can record that during that for instructional stuff and videos that I've been doing, and it works out well for them because then they have a lot of content going forward. So yeah, I would say that just email me at theportraitdude@gmail.com if you're interested in any of that, and I'll get you set up. So thank you.
Awesome. All right. Well, Wes, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It was nice chatting with you and seeing you again, since haven't seen you around since you photobombed the governor's wife, I guess.
Yeah.
It might be a few months before we get to see each other at something again. That's we all have our fingers crossed for conventions in the fall, but we'll just have to wait and see.
Well, once they lift restrictions, we'll have to get coffee again. Now, you're pretty local, so we'll make that work, and that way we can just chat and catch up, man.
That's true. I'll take you upstairs our office and show you all the cable TV studio stuff we're trying to figure out how to use now.
Yeah, that'll be fun. It's if there's anything that I've learned through trying to edit video, it's just like video is such a completely different world, because I mean I'm not used to using like light sources and stuff like that. I'm used to using Flash, so I'm used to that, being able to control that, pop through that. But yeah, as far as that and keyframing and transitions and there's timeline stuff. Okay, I've got to worry about this now. It's a completely different world.
Awesome. All right, well, dude, thank you so much. I appreciate you being here.
All right, thanks, buddy. I appreciate the invite, and always a pleasure talking to you.
All right, and thank you guys for listening. I'll plan to be back next Saturday evening again. I think my guests are going to be my friend Justin and Miranda, and I think we might have a guest appearance from Deadpool. So that should be fun. I'll see you guys next week.